Hi, this is Mr. Cordes, and today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be talking about John Steinbeck's writing style, specifically looking at the bookend techniques that authors use to encompass the content of their story. So you have this document in front of you. If it did not open like this, I would suggest going to your Google Docs, opening up a blank Google Doc, and then clicking up over here into the side, going to File and Open. That may have brought it up in the proper format so that you can see the side by side. If that doesn't work, then you can use Cami to go over the document itself. Hopefully we have figured out all the technology so that we can have a growth mindset and push through and get some notes done for this. Before I begin, the bookend feature, the bookend idea is really when authors use an event at the beginning of the story and then at the end of the story. So what's happening is you are essentially having the content in the story, but you've got bookends to hold it up. Now, the term bookends is just that. They're bookends. Usually they're like two objects in a stack of books that hold up those books. So at my house, I've got two iron elephants. They sit on either side, and I've got a series of books that I keep on a bookshelf stacked up. Now, if the bookend was removed, my books would fall over. So the bookend feature really kind of helps keep the story intact. If you've watched or read Harry Potter, you know that Harry starts out at the Dursleys and then ends at the Dursleys. So he is experiencing Hogwarts and being a wizard and doing all that magic, but that's encompassed. The bookends is where he is at the Dursleys' house. So understanding that that's a technique, and John Steinbeck uses that in Of Mice and Men. We have 6 chapters, and actually the beginning part, chapter 1, is mirrors what happens in chapter 6. So they're actually both chapter 1 and chapter 6 take place in the same setting. And so we're going to analyze chapter 1 today, and when you get to chapter 6, you'll realize, oh my gosh, the significance is tremendous. But John Steinbeck actually does this in every chapter. So I think it's chapter 3, they start at the bunkhouse and then they end at the bunkhouse. They start in one place and then they end at another. So by doing this, you are able to see that there's a story intact. So let's take a look. You have this document in front of you, and I'm actually going to be using the board behind me if you would like to draw along as well to kind of get a sense of what's happening. Let me move my little image here for you, and then our directions say, it says, read and annotate the 2 passages. Circle similar words and phrases that contain double meanings or that represent metaphors. So one item can represent something else. What is that representation? Okay. And it also says, based on the description, draw an image of the story's content, which we will be doing together. You can do this on your own page, or you can do this if you have an art thing, you know how to use drawing on your Google Docs. You could do that as well. Okay. Let's take a look at chapter 1. Let's start us off. It says, a few miles south of Soledad, the Salinas River drops in close to the hillside bank and runs deep and green. The water is warm too, for it has slipped twinkling over the yellow sands in the sunlight before reaching the narrow pool. On one side of the river, the golden foothill slopes curve up to the strong and rocky Galaban Mountains. But on the valley side of the water is lined with trees, willows fresh and green with every spring, carrying in their lower leaf junctures the debris of the winter's flooding, and sycamores with molted white recumbent limbs and branches that arch over the pool. On the sandy bank under the trees, the leaves lie deep and so crisp that the lizard makes a great skittering if he runs among them. Rabbits come out of the brush to sit on the sand in the evening, and the damp flats are covered with the night track of coons, that's raccoons, and with the spread pads of dogs from the ranches, and with the split wedge tracks of deer that come to drink in the dark. Now, this first part is kind of like, oh, okay, great. He's describing the forest. It's actually pretty significant. If we begin, let's take a moment, ladies and gentlemen, and let's identify things of nature. So we have Salinas River. That's one. We have the hillside runs deep and green. I'm going to use that one as well because it's referencing to the shrubbage, the bush, the debris that's around that. Let's look just for nature because water is actually significant because they come back to river. So those are going to correspond later. Let's do this. River. I'm going to underline river because it's part of water, and I'm going to underline water as well. It says yellow sands of the sunlight reach the narrow pool. So that is water. I want to identify that water. On the other side of the foothill slopes curve up to the strong rocky Galaban Mountains. So that could be indication of nature as well. So I'm going to go back and forth. If I'm looking at my drawing, okay, what's happening is John Steinbeck is taking us from this down from the Salinas River, slopes in, it gets us down to this narrow pool that they have here at the bottom, but then it says that it curves up and the Galaban Mountains are on this side. So you're seeing there you're seeing there kind of he takes us into this place where there's this stream, right? This stream that has come through, and you've got this narrow pool. Now, just for reference, I'm an excellent artist, so don't feel discouraged if you cannot draw as fantastically as I can. But you've got that narrow pool. The deer are coming down here as well. You've got your trees on either side, right? There's the next line. It says, but the valley side of the water I'm going to identify, is lined with trees. So I've got trees, willow fresh, and green with every spring carrying in the lower leaf junctures. Okay. Of the debris of the winter's flooding, the sycamores with molted, that's a type of tree. White recumbent limbs and the branches that arch over the pool. That's where the stream meets at the very bottom. So you've noticed I'm starting my annotations for today is I'm going to bold all the nature components, and then I'm going to underline the ideas of water. So you've got all these trees, their branches are hanging up over off to the side. It's very forest-like, okay? If you've read of Mice and Men before, and just like I already mentioned, this is actually the starting point of our story. It's also the ending part of our story. So George and Lenny come down to this spot in chapter 1 and hang out and talk, and that's where he's like, I like beans with ketchup, and they get in the argument, and he's like, I'm going to go live in the cave. This right here is where that story takes place, okay? So it says, on the sandy bank under the trees, the leaves lie deep and so crisp that a lizard makes great skittering among them. So trees, I'm going to put as bold because that's nature. Same with leaves. I'm going to put that as bold as well. So that a lizard comes skittering among them. Now, lizard, I'm going to italicize because that's like a living thing, okay? We can hear that lizard skittering across, so we're going to italicize that. I'm also going to italicize rabbits because rabbits is not only significant to the story, but it's also significant to Lenny. So if you've read through chapter 1, you realize that he likes soft things, and the idea of something that is soothing to the touch will come in handy as we read through. It also gets him in trouble, but as we go through, you'll understand. Part of the rabbits as well was part of Lenny's dream. He wanted to tend the rabbits on his own land. So the rabbits come out from the brush and sit on the sand in the evening, the damp flats that recover from the track of coons. So I'm going to actually highlight track of coons. Let's see if I can. Let's just do it that way. That is an animal as well. Okay, that's the raccoons, the spread pads of dogs. Okay, so there's dog tracks. There's also the split wedge tracks of deer, so another animal. So we're getting the idea that there is life, down in here. You've got the dog. It says that the dogs, oh, actually, let's do this. Let's go to our bookend, okay? Because if this is the beginning on this side, and we're taken down in here, this is where George and Lenny set up camp. So they've got their firewood right here. They start and they set up the fire. Let me put the fire right here. Again, such a fantastic drawing. Be careful not to be envious. I'm also going to draw over here the little tiny rabbits. Those rabbits will come and play Okay. Little cottontail right there. The rabbits will come into play because, like what I mentioned, Lenny wants to tend the rabbits, and so John Steinbeck specifically puts them here, excuse me, so that we know that that is part of the story, that they're going to be significant. Okay. If you look on the other side, the ending of chapter 1, it says, the red light dimmed on the coals. So that's the fire that's been created. Up the hill from the river, a coyote yammered. So we've got a coyote up over here, right? Yelling out. That is my coyote. Okay. And says the dog answers from the other side of the stream. So somewhere across, there's another dog that's yammering. The sycamore leaves whispered in the little night breeze. So if I go over here to sycamore, that's a type of tree. I'm going to bold that because that's part of nature as well. I can italicize dog. I can italicize coyote. Okay. River, another concept. Now, river, ladies and gentlemen, you'll notice that there's lots of concepts about river and water and where it leads. If anything that we can identify is that water universally symbolizes life. Okay? So you can make that note off to the side. If we put water right here, I'm up over here to the first part, I'm going to put life because water represents life. So John Steinbeck is saying that there's life here, that this is where George and Lenny talks about their dreams. This is where they talk about their hope and their future. Okay. Unfortunately, it's also the ending part of our story in which I'm not going to, no spoilers, but this is not a very happy place in chapter 6. Okay. They will talk about rabbits. They will talk about owning the farm, but it is not as happy as you would think. Okay. So what is John Steinbeck doing? Why is he doing this? If you look down below at our questions, it says here, based on your annotation analysis, explain what the author is trying to communicate to readers. What is the significance of this passage in relation to the entire story? So we know that John Steinbeck keeps our story intact. Sure, lots of things go on and lots of small little events, and we get to be introduced with other characters, but what happens in that particular moment? So what he does, what he is doing, is he is bringing us down so that we get settled in this one spot where George and Lenny are. And this is the moment where they talk about their hopes. They talk about their dreams. It's a very private, intimate moment where they are expressing like their heart's desires. Okay. During this time in the early 1900s, you worked on a farm or you owned a farm. And so if you owned your own farm, you didn't have to worry about anything. You grew your own crops. You had your own cattle. You had your own life. And that's where you would be. Versus I'm working for someone. So George and Lenny go to work on a farm. They don't have their own house. They don't have their own place. And that's their desire, is that they could own their own farm and what's known as live off the fat of the land. Raise sheep, have chickens. Lenny wants to raise rabbits and take care of the rabbits. So this right here is where John Steinbeck offers up our hopes and dreams. This is the moment where he says that there is life. And unfortunately, the opposite of life is death. And we'll find that out in chapter 6 and why that happens. But this right here, this is the bookend feature. This is what happens when you go and you start off with Harry living underneath the staircase at the Dursleys' house in the Harry Potter books. And then at the very end, he's back at the Dursleys. A lot has happened in between, but he's essentially a different person. So you will see George and Lenny in this spot in chapter 6, but they're different people. And you have to figure out why they're different people. So John Steinbeck takes us to this place where we can understand that this is where the hopes and dreams are, that this is where our story really takes place, that what is exposed and what's said really shows the personal and connectivity between George and Lenny, that friendship that they have. Okay. Sometimes we can do this for 2 chapters. I think below in your document, you also have the items for chapter 2. It starts in the bunkhouse and then ends in the bunkhouse as well. So if you read through and annotate, you would be able to see what is the significant part of this passage. What is our author trying to communicate? A lot of times when we read literature, it's not just about the story. It's about what is my author trying to communicate to me. Okay. If you have questions or concerns, just let me know. That has been the bookend activity for John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men for chapter 1.